When a priest finally forced open the door to a sealed church basement, he found the walls completely covered in frantic, overlapping scratches. They weren't random marks. Every single line formed the exact same warning: don't let him finish the prayer. To understand how a quiet, deeply religious 19-year-old girl ended up in that room, we have to go back to rural America in 1998. Claire Bennett was entirely normal, but after returning from a weekend trip to an abandoned farmhouse with friends, her behavior shifted. She developed severe insomnia, and every single night, her bedroom door began slowly opening on its own at exactly 3:13 a.m. Then the voices started. Claire would stand in the empty corners of her house, whispering, arguing, and pleading with the air. Sometimes she would laugh. Her mother later described the sound as being entirely too deep to belong to a human vocal cord. Her parents sought medical help immediately, bringing in doctors and psychologists. But every clinical intervention failed. During every single examination, Claire's behavior reset, and she presented to the experts as a completely healthy, rational teenager. As the psychological evaluations led nowhere, physical anomalies began to appear. Strange black bruises shaped like obscure symbols formed across Claire's arms and back. The breaking point arrived a few nights later, when her younger brother woke up screaming. He found Claire staring at him, inverted, clinging to the corner of his bedroom ceiling. While medical science found nothing wrong with her, her family discovered a highly specific trigger. The moment anyone in the house opened a Bible or began reciting a prayer, Claire would instantly begin to shake violently. Therapy, medication, and parental support had yielded nothing but dead ends. Trapped in a rapidly escalating nightmare with no earthly solutions left, the family sought out a supernatural containment strategy from the church. The church dispatched Father Michael Donovan. He was a highly credible investigator with extensive experience analyzing cases of severe mental illness and separating them from claims of actual possession. This chart maps out the core anomaly Donovan recorded in his private case notes. A standard psychological response requires an auditory stimulus first, followed by a physical reaction. But in Claire's case, her violent physical reactions were spiking on the timeline before the prayers were even spoken. Something inside her was anticipating the words before they left the priest's mouth. During their initial confrontation, Claire refused to look at him. She stared at the floor and whispered a direct threat. "You shouldn't have come here." The voice wasn't hers.
It was rough, older, and sounded distinctly like two separate people speaking in unison. The situation reached a critical mass later that night when Claire locked herself inside her bedroom. Her mother called Father Michael in tears because the voice projecting through the wooden door was loudly reciting fluent Latin. Claire had never studied the language.
Precognitive awareness combined with sudden unlearned linguistic abilities bypasses all known models of mental illness. For Father Michael, the evidence left no room for doubt. He authorized an isolated, highly dangerous exorcism. The ritual was strictly controlled. It took place at midnight inside an abandoned prayer house outside of town. No cameras were permitted. Only 5 witnesses were allowed inside, and Claire was physically restrained to a heavy wooden chair. At first, nothing happened. Then the environment inside the room broke down. The temperature plummeted instantly. Under the harsh overhead light, witnesses watched their own breath turn into heavy, visible mist. The physical constraints failed next. The heavy wooden chair began dragging itself across the floor on its own. Claire snapped her head up and opened her eyes. The whites of her eyes were completely gone, replaced entirely by pitch black. One of the assistants panicked and lunged for the exit. The door wouldn't budge. The heavy wooden doors of the prayer house had inexplicably locked from the inside, trapping all 5 witnesses in the room. The auditory overload hit a peak. Multiple, entirely distinct voices erupted from Claire's mouth simultaneously. Adult males, adult females, and young children all spoke at once, perfectly repeating every single line of Father Michael's prayers backward. Then the screaming stopped. Total silence filled the freezing room. Claire slowly turned her head, looked Father Michael directly in the eyes, smiled, and said, "He's behind you." Standard religious rites had utterly failed to cleanse the subject. The entity hadn't fled the ritual, It had hijacked the protocol to trap and dominate the investigators. Whatever happened after that final sentence was completely sealed by the church, but the immediate consequence is a matter of public record.
Father Michael vanished 2 days later. Police found his car abandoned near a forest road, and he was never seen again. Claire Bennett actually survived the ordeal, but she never spoke another word. A woman once possessed by a chorus of overlapping voices lived out the rest of her life in unbroken silence. The case sat dormant in church archives for years, until an anonymous user leaked the only surviving audio recording from that night onto the internet. Most of the tape is heavy static and broken whispers, but right near the end of the recording, a clear secondary voice cuts directly through the white noise. It simply states, "We never left." Today, the abandoned prayer house still stands. It remains entirely empty, locked and quietly rotting in the woods just outside of town. Locals strictly avoid the area. Every single year, on the exact anniversary of the ritual, faint whispered voices can still be heard echoing from inside the empty structure.